to it as well there. So just know that you're being recorded. Secondly, if you can change your name on your photo, so on the upper right hand of your actual photo, there's 3 dots. If you click on that, you can change your name to whatever you want to be today, maybe your own name and your organization. That would be wonderful. It's kind of cool for people to know where you're calling in from. And then it's great if you can keep yourself muted unless you're talking. Little background noise adds up a lot, and we want to make sure our speakers have great clarity when they're speaking. Let's see, I think that's all in terms of Zoom. We have some wonderful, everybody here is a wonderful special guest, but we have some extra special guests today as well. We have Dr. Tina Stone, who's chair of the PHAB, and I want to introduce her and thank her for all of her work, and then she'll say a couple words and introduce our elected officials as well. So here we go.
No. Can't hear you, Tina.
Still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there we go.
Yes, okay.
Perfect.
So my name is Tina Stone, and I am chairing PHAB, and PHAB stands for Public Health Advisory Board. And without going into too much detail, we basically work with the health department and the health board, which is our county council members. And I just want to thank everyone for being here. This having this forum this morning has been a culmination of huge amount of work from everyone involved in the task force. So I want to thank everyone who's been involved, but I also want to thank everyone who's here today this morning. And the special welcome to council members. We have 2 council members today. We have Mr. Barry Buchanan, who is our county council, and we also have Ms. Holly Huthman, who is our city council member. And so, Mr. Buchanan, would you mind saying a couple words this morning? Barry?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to turn everything on. Okay. Good morning, everybody. How are you? I just want to say thank you to this group and the task force that has been working so hard on this for putting this
Barry,
together.
are you having trouble speaking?
Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to
see.
thank you all for being here this morning and thank everybody for all the hard work they put into this project. It's just been enormously successful, put together in record time. Tina, you've been just a great leader to lead us through this process, and it's such an honor to serve with you on the PHAB. And that's all I have to say. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Ms. Holly Huthman, would you mind saying a couple of words to everyone this morning?
Sure. Yeah, I have 2 roles. I'm on the Bellingham City Council, but also I'm an employer. So I am getting ready to open up my business, which is a food service. It's translating right now into a food service business. Normally it's mostly an event space, so we're changing with the times. So yeah, I'm very interested to hear the information that you have to present today. Thank you.
Thank you both for very much. It really is awesome that you 2 can be here. So that's all I have to say, and I'll take it over back to Elizabeth.
I'm going to bump it over to Holly. So thanks everyone for being here.
Wonderful. So I think also throughout, my name's Holly O'Neill. Good to see you all. And I'm one of the co-facilitators for the Employer Support Task Force, which is an initiative of the Public Health Advisory Board, which we call PHAB, in case you ever forget these acronyms which fly through the air. I'm an East County resident, and so I live in the South Fork, and I have the honor and the privilege of starting us up here with a little presentation to connect everybody. So I'm going to share my screen and get us started. So hold on a minute here. Oh, the fun, the fun. You know, one of the best parts about this time is how we're all improving our ability to use technology. It's really a beautiful thing. Barry, every time I see you on the screen, it cracks me up because I feel like we're having a similar experience here of trying to navigate this terrain. All righty, so I'm gonna play this slideshow. Can you all see my screen? And it has the title of our day. Super. All right, so today's forum, this is, what is it, the third one we've done, friends? Is that right? Time's getting away from me. This is our third forum, and the topic for today is how do we support employees during the stress of COVID-19? And our agenda is I'm going to give you some background information, and then we're going to have the panel present. Everybody's on this panel, it's an amazing panel, and I'm so excited they're all here to share with us their perspectives on this question, and then we'll open it up for discussion. We have about an hour and 15 minutes in total for this forum today. So to provide a little background, this effort came out of the COVID Employer Support Task Force. And the task force was established by resolution from the County Council, serving as our health board, to help our communities, businesses, and organizations share, innovate, and improve best practices for safety in the face of COVID-19 now and in the future. And as you may have noticed, that now and in the future continues to become more and more amorphous, perhaps would be the word, as there's just so many unknowns. And I think we're all grappling with the fact that there's no quick fix here. We are in this together. That's the reality, and that the timelines are undefined. So here we are now, still in phase 2, working together, doing our best. The task force was set up. We had 140 people sign up to serve on the task force. And we launched in April, I believe, with 140 members in 18 sectors. And so each of these sectors has been coming together to share best practices and try and understand the guidance and figure out how to implement that guidance. One of the other outcomes of our project has been the Safer, Stronger Together campaign. And what was asked for here was how can we more easily communicate, we being businesses and organizations, how can we more easily communicate with our customers and clients about these are the practices that are going to help us all stay safe? And so, for example, if a staff member is having a conversation with somebody coming into their store about, yes, we really do need you to wear a mask, they have some backdrop for that. They have a poster, they have the weight or the authority of the health department and the regional economic partnership behind them to say, yes, this is how we do things, and that it's being spread throughout Whatcom County. So it's identifiable. It shows that we actually are all together on this in this effort. If you go to the website, so we have a website now. It's called actually WhatcomTogether.org. You can see you've all been there, I think, now because you signed up for the forums, but you'll also notice it's a way to link to the resources. So this website connects directly to the health department's website, and the health department's website has a page called Resources for Businesses and Organizations. This clicks you right there, so that the two websites go back and forth pretty easily. And this gets businesses and organizations directly to kind of the best information, the simple, like, here's what you need to know, and here's some resources that other people in the task force have found to be useful. So this is what we're trying to really help everybody in Whatcom County get connected to, is the campaign, and then the resources, the information they're going to need to open safely and to also stay up to date, because the information keeps changing. So I'm going to shift now to our panelists. And Marty, I'm going to turn it over to you. Shall I keep on managing the PowerPoint, or do you want me to hand that over? What's easiest?
Why don't you just hang on to it? And Sterling, you can tell Holly when to switch over. But let me just say, I'm Marty Solomon. I am another one of the facilitators for the Employer Support Task Force, along with Holly and Laura Todd, and I work with Elizabeth as well. And I had the pleasure a couple of weeks ago to meet with Pamela Wheeler and Debbie Paulina, who are on this call. We met to talk about the Employer Support Task Force, and near the end of our conversation, one of them said, has anybody been discussing how to help employees who are having trouble dealing with the stress of this time? And I'm like, that's the topic for our next forum. And we've got two great presenters right here. And so I'm very excited that they're on the call. And then we also have Sterling Chick, who's gonna talk next, and Karen King. So it's a great panel of presenters to talk about the psychological impacts of living with this pandemic and how employers can help employees whose work is being affected by the difficulties of coping with stress. So each of these panelists are going to talk about a different question, and then we'll open it up for discussion and your questions. But along the way, if you want to put questions in the chat box, that's great. Go right ahead, and we'll see them there. And how about if each of you who are presenting introduces yourself when it's your turn to talk? So let's start with Sterling. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then you just jump right in.
All right. Hi, I'm Sterling Chick. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, and Sterling, I think, can I just say, if people want to be able to see Sterling better, you can click on your panel and look at the show active speaker view, and then you can just see Sterling and not all of us at once. Go ahead, Sterling, thanks.
So I'm the vice chair of PHAB. I'm also the clinical director of CATSA Community Services. We are mostly a children's mental health agency in the Northwest that I'm in charge of. So this is COVID-19 is a public health crisis. It's a economic crisis, and it's a social crisis. We have been forced to rethink how we live and work together, and it is a disaster. So for us as a community mental health agency, there's a fair amount written about disasters. We were part of the response for the Oso landslide. And so there's a fair amount of research written about what happens to people, what their reactions are like after a disaster. Can you show that slide, Holly?
Yep.
So this is from a fair amount of research. This is actually for a hurricane where you have a warning and a threat. There's this phase right there when the disaster happens where there's this kind of heroic and community cohesion, and then the bottom drops out. And if you look at the emotional lows of how long things can last after big hurricanes or earthquakes, 6 to 9 months down is when the lower parts of the emotional lows are really hitting hard. Even after a year, we were at Oso a year later at the schools. That was a tough time for a lot of the students there. And this idea of reconstruction taking place, not even beginning to start until after a year. So there's a struggle with this because this is not a disaster like a hurricane or an earthquake. An earthquake lasts for several seconds. Some windstorms or things like that. A hurricane lasts for several hours. This is not like that. This is not a typical disaster. So that the model may not be a great fit because we've never been through this before. So, an alternative way to look at this, and I've read a lot about this, is to think of this like it's a siege. Sieges reveal themselves over time. This COVID-19 kind of crept up on us, and the reckoning came slowly and in phases and in waves. COVID has laid siege to Whatcom County. It's laid siege to the state of Washington, to the United States, and the entire world. It's caused us to shelter in place. It's restricted our movements. It's blocked our escape by airplane or even driving north by car. It's forced us to rethink how we work and how we live. And when we go outside at our own risk. It's not like a bomb's going to be dropped on you like the siege of Sarajevo. It's in some ways even worse because you don't have any idea what the risk really is until much later. This new normal, this low, like where that cursor is there down at the low part, that's just going to start this fall, because when school doesn't start the way it's supposed to, and all these families can't go to work like they hoped after doing 25 weeks in a row of having your kids at home and they're not able to work, things are going to get harder. And so one of the things that employers can do or understand is that their workers are really nervous, and they're they want certainty in an uncertain world, very difficult task for an employer. What employers can do is have frequent and clear communication. CCS was totally, I mean, like everyone, we were caught off guard by this. We have 3,600 employees. We have 17 shelters where some of our workers are frontline workers going into people's homes doing home care. Some of our workers are working remote. Some of our workers have been put on leave. So each one of them has a whole different thing that they have to confront. The difference between someone who's on leave is the struggles that they have is so different from a worker who's working in a shelter with mentally ill and substance abusing people who are misbehaving frequently. What we had so many times from our staff was they wanted us to be clear. They wanted answers, and they wanted them in writing. So because we're a big organization and part of it's unionized, we came up with a COVID pandemic response that's 150 pages long. Way too difficult to digest for most staff, but managers and supervisors were supposed to digest those and relay them to people. But they wanted to know about masks. They wanted to know where the hand sanitizer was. They wanted to know what the plastic shields are going to look like, and all those things. And we struggled at first to get them answers, and it really did add to the stress. I mean, we don't, employers can add to stress. Our experience that we added to stress by not being clear, by not being, by not having things in writing and not doing those things. At the corporate level, we've kind of got our act together now. We have this program called Nourishing, where we send out an email each day, actually, with resources and sometimes weekly good news. We have a newsletter, we do gatherings, we do online meditation. We are doing a virtual memorial for people who have died, because that's happened in some parts of our agency. We have an EAP. We gave extra pay to workers who are frontline workers for the first 3 months. Specifically for our workers in Whatcom County, almost all of our workers, all 250 of them, are working remotely. And so we're staying in contact with them with weekly supervision, being able to kind of find different ways to text with them, or to use chat, or to use ad hoc video conferences. We encourage people to try to approximate what they did during their week. So a couple of our sites have a virtual lunch that they have nearly every day, which is really awesome. So this idea that we're also working on a staff appreciation week, so that we're going to be trying to come up with ways, because we used to do picnics and we're not going to do those anymore. So those are some of the things that we're doing, and we're just trying to notice that people are working hard in a whole different way, a whole different skill set for a person who's working remotely than they've ever had to use before. And it's really hard work. People are getting, you hear words like COVID fatigue and COVID burnout. Those are new terms. They're going to be real, and that's going to be affecting our workers for a really long time. This graph that we have may be extended for way longer than it looks like right there. Thank you.
Thanks, Sterling. So one of the things I was really hearing there is to increase communication, to reduce stress, and expect a prolonged period where we're all going to be coping with stress. All right, and thank you for listing out some of the strategies that you've used to increase communication. Very helpful. Holly, you want to switch the slide and we'll switch speakers? The next person is Karen King, and Karen, Karen's well, why don't you introduce yourself? And she's going to talk about how stress is manifesting in people's behavior and what helps people cope with the kinds of stress we're all under at this time.
Great. And
Thanks.
Would you mind, Holly, if we could see, if you could take us off of the shared screen so we could have our view of the group? Great. Thank you. So, Sterling, thank you for kind of giving us the context. I feel like we're in the disillusionment phase, and we'll probably be hanging out there for a long time with a lot of different variations in that. So I'm Karen King. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I've been in practice 15 years, and I've also worked in disaster mental health in Houston during Hurricane Katrina. I've worked in integrated behavioral health, which is actually how I know Gina. And I've worked in a psychiatric inpatient unit. I've worked for the Nooksack Indian tribe, and I've also had a private practice in town for the past 10 years. I also own a business, so I have 22 employees. We have King Health Associates, 14 of which are counselors and 2 ARNPs, and then some admin staff. So we're a small company, and we're definitely feeling the effects of this as well. So my specialties are working with stress as a result of step parenting, and also working with the stress and anxiety and results of growing up with a narcissistic parent. So those are the things that I particularly enjoy working with. But what that has helped me do is understand a wide variety of mental health issues. So I teach meditation courses and DBT workshops. If you don't know what that is, it's basically mindfulness and emotion training. So that's who I am. And I think that everyone who's spoken so far has really pointed out, and I think it's important to remind everyone that we can all agree that this time that we're living in right now, the thing that characterizes it is uncertainty. And so by its very definition, what happens when we're uncertain as humans is that we go back to our instinctual responses. And our instinctual responses are usually fear. And so when we have an unknown and something that happens, like Sterling pointed out, suddenly, we're going to fill in what we don't know with fear. So that is really the crux of all the mental health challenges that we're seeing in ourselves, in our community, in our employees, is filling in the gaps with fear. So something also I think to note that's important is that we are incredibly resilient as human beings, and we do survive things like the Oso landslide and cultural traumas like 9/11, and that we're amazing at adapting. So there is a lot of difficulty, but also to remember we all have this inherent resilience, I think is important. So I'm going to talk just a few minutes more about the general concepts of mental health challenges that are happening right now and how to cope. But I'm actually feeling like the real juice that I'm really interested in is hearing your questions. So I'm really excited to hear your questions about this, because I'm not familiar with the kind of employers we have on the call. You may have 2 employees, you may have 3,600, and so you'll have different challenges. So I'm really eager to hear about that. So the way that I've been running the business, speaking with clients, and thinking about this time period is that we are in pandemic soup. So all of us are in the soup together. We're covered in the goo of the soup. We're swimming in the soup. And there's no exit to the pot so far. And so we're all hanging out in this soup. And one of the major coping skills that mental health counselors teach their clients is that everything will pass. And so right now, we don't have the luxury of really knowing what's going to pass. And so we're all just hanging out in the soup and getting really comfortable with the soup. And so I think as an employer, it's especially important to recognize that we are really all in this together. Like Sterling was talking about disaster mental health, you know, we are supporting our employees and we're going through the crisis at the same time. So this is like a really unprecedented experience for all of us. And so it's important to remember, I think, that it's not if employees get stressed out and have mental health challenges, it's when. And having a plan is key for that. So you're not having to scramble. And this has been fast. So a lot of us as employers, we are having to make these things up as we go along. But I think recognizing it's going to get worse and then it'll get better. So you need to have a plan in place. And so one of the things that's true about mental health is that, and I was just reading this yesterday, is that it's 18% of the population has a diagnosable anxiety disorder. So that has doubled. They did a huge survey just last week. I think it was the Census Bureau that did this. And people are doubling their experience of depressive symptoms and also anxiety. So that's huge. I mean, that's a major thing to understand, that 34% of your staff, if we're using statistics here, are going to be experiencing diagnostically diagnosed anxiety right now. So that's just an important backdrop, I think. The people that are higher risk for experiencing that kind of anxiety and depression are, of course, people in the front lines, and grocery workers, healthcare workers, but also people that are caring for kids at home, people that are caring for their adult family at home. So it's important to know about your employees' situation in order to help treat them well and give them support. And so the behaviors that you might recognize on a Zoom call if you're working online, or anytime really, is irritability, lateness, understanding that people might be drinking more or using more negative coping skills. You know, drinking is definitely increased during this time. And also if they're isolating. So the important things to do to address just those 4 or 5 things is, number one, as an employer, stop and recognize this ubiquitous saying that mental health is filled with, that is so true, which is, if you're on the plane and it's going down, you use the oxygen mask yourself first. And I think that's really important to remember as an employer. You have to give yourself the oxygen and then give it to your employees. And this might be a challenge, this next one, but you have to be a little bit vulnerable yourself as a leader. And so there's a lot of research that is recent, but Google especially has done research on productivity, that the teams that are more productive, it's not due to their skill set or their personalities, it's due to the vulnerability of the leader. So we're not used to thinking about productivity and vulnerability, but I think employees knowing that you're in it with them makes a huge difference for stability and productivity. Giving them more short-term projects so there's more of a sense of accomplishment and meaning. If there's stability in schedule, stability, like Sterling was saying, communication, but stability and predictability are the things that are going to help people build resilience during this disillusionment phase. And facilitating connection, creating connection where you never had to before. Like we do something similar where I have open lunch meetings at my desk Mondays and Thursdays, and everyone can just drop by. I play music in the background, my animals are here. We try to make it really comfortable, and I can just hear how my counselors are doing. I send out surveys to them, silly surveys that ask them what their favorite therapist name is. It's the name of their first pet and the street they lived on. Just really trying to encourage connection and playfulness. And having a way for them to communicate, having a way for your employees to communicate when they're feeling especially stressed is super important. So there's a method. If you're small, you don't necessarily have HR. You don't have a process in place. They just come talk to you. But now may be a time, especially when they're fearful for their jobs, for their family members. And so really making sure your employees know it's safe to come talk to you and whatever that method is that's in place. So that's what I have. And again, I'm super eager to hear your questions or any clarification I'm happy to provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That was so many great tips and tools already in this form. That was a lot. You're a gold mine. Thank you so much. And now I want to turn it over to Pamela and Debbie. And I'm not sure which of you is who wants to speak first, but go ahead and introduce yourselves. And they're going to talk about how businesses can support employees who are having a hard time managing mental health issues at work. Oh, you bringing up a slide again? Yeah, there we go. Okay. And so Pamela, you want to start by introducing yourself?
Yes, my name is Pamela Wheeler. I am the HR director or senior HR director for Opportunity Council. And I have been in human resources for probably 25, 30 years. I have a PhD in industrial organizational psychology. So I know a little bit about workplace behaviors. It's basically Uber HR, but it definitely helps me to get the job done. Here at Opportunity Council, I'm just going to speak for a little bit, and I'm going to let Debbie introduce herself, and then I'll let her talk about some of the resources we developed. But here at Opportunity Council, we are definitely essential workers, and we're classified as such because we're a community service organization that works with all of our most vulnerable members of our society. And it really does impact our employees even before COVID came along. These folks are looking at individuals that are on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, they're needing the most basic support, housing, energy, they're homeless. They actually don't have a home at all. How do they keep their homes warm, and educating their children, you know, just early learning and development needs and whatnot. So our folks had already developed a system of coping with how they support our community and vulnerable members of our community. And that coping system definitely included their coworkers, their leaders, how they de-stress after they encounter something that was just really stressful or heavy for them. And once COVID came along, that system broke down. They no longer had the support of their coworkers, their managers were not immediately available. Most of us were on Zoom and very distant from one another. So, and COVID has definitely impacted the ability to touch someone else. So all of that impacts our employees. All of that alters the way that they deal with stress. And what we were seeing was the manifestation of this stress in our employees. I think, Sterling, you were spot on about the way COVID presents itself as a siege. And what's worse about it is it's not about just that it's destroying our lives, our way of life. It may just destroy our life altogether. It is life-threatening, and that's what makes it even harder. So with our work spanning several different disciplines and whatnot, we literally are developing protocols and ways to address our employees' questions and issues for each of the different disciplines within our organization. We have 300 employees and about 6 different disciplines or approaches to serving our community. So we looked at what could we do to support our folks, and as Karen said, being clear about the information we provide to them. And I think you said this as well, Sterling, making sure that the information we provided was clear and timely. So answering all of their questions, and how do we make that accessible to them? And I think we were entirely blessed to have Debbie Swellina on our team. She's just pretty innovative about how we get this information out to our folks. So with that, I'm gonna let Debbie speak.
Yeah, so I actually have been with Opportunity Council since March, and I joined the team 2 days before the stay-at-home order went into effect. So timely. So I actually have sort of been driving the COVID train for the Opportunity Council since then. And it's been a very interesting journey for us. As Pamela was mentioning, we actually cross over numerous human services areas. So I mention this again because for a lot of different businesses, they focus on one specific field or one specific sort of area. But after this call, or later on, if you want to get in touch with Pamela or I, if you cross into any of our areas, we're happy to share resources, more information, or anything that I'm going to just briefly, real quick here, touch on. We have since the beginning of COVID, all of our workers have been deemed essential. We have not laid off anybody. Everybody's been working, whether it be our frontline employees in our residential facilities, or our folks that have been remote working, still dealing with our housing case managers, our early learning and family services folks who have remained in touch with all of our Head Start families, continuing to provide meals to some of our families, continuing to provide educational resources, continuing to stay in touch with our childcare providers. We've got teams out there across 5 counties that are continuing to do work. So we've had a lot of challenges dealing with the different stressors that come between, say, a residential counselor that's working on site in a residential facility, and say a preschool teacher that is trying to provide packets and trying to do a Zoom call with a preschooler, who doesn't really understand, either doesn't understand how the Zoom works, or it may be a family that's struggling and doesn't have the technology, or it may be somebody that works in our homeless service center that's trying to do outreach as part of our homeless outreach team. And they're seeing a worse and worse and worse and worse situation developing, obviously, with our homeless population here in Whatcom County, as the pandemic has been continuing, and their stressors have been getting higher and higher and higher. So, as Sterling said, one of our key responding sort of things that we've been working on here as an organization in NHR has been communication. But as you all know, the federal and state, local government and agencies have been pushing out lots of information. It's very hard to digest. It comes out in these bursts. It's document after document. Rather than pushing it forward to our employees just as is, what we do here in HR is we do the digestion of it. And then we provide our employees either in an email or a summary sheet. We've stood up a internal COVID-19 website, and we provide them these like one-page summary sheets on the website. We provide them with a short email with an update on a topic. And then that way they know that we are engaged in it, but they're also getting the information that they need for their area or their situation, that we're not pushing forward all kinds of legal jargon that's hard to get through, or compliance information that they read and then they're like, what does this even mean? We're doing that digestion for them. This is what it means for you. This is how it impacts you. And that's been bringing a lot of comfort to a lot of our employees, because they can then stop trying to figure it out for themselves, or getting really frustrated with it. It also prevents us from having to deal with a lot of, hey, I read this on social media today, this is a great idea. And we're like, actually, that's not a great idea, and here's why. We can kind of get out in front of some of these more interesting concepts that people have, been suggesting. So there's that sort of angle to it. It also has actually de-stressed our employee population tremendously, because by getting out in front of some of these things, for instance, the cloth masks, we were just in front of that enough that it brings confidence to our employees. Right? As wow, my employer's really paying attention. Wow, my employer's engaged. My employer cares about us. My employer wants to remain engaged. We've had employees working inside of all of our facilities the entire time. We have not shut down our buildings, because some of them are essential on-site workers versus essential remote. And so we've been implementing all of LNI's, state LNI's requirements for the workplace, right? And some of them have been, entry protocols. Come into the building, you got to deal with the entry screening questions, making sure your hands are, washed, cloth mask type of thing. Wow, my employer cares about making sure that I feel good. But one of the biggest things that I just real quick want to touch on is the FICRA leaves. I don't know if that impacts everybody on this call, but those are the new federal leave programs under the CARES Act. I think they're under CARES Act, but they're the new federal leave programs. And one of them is the part of the FMLA program that you now can use for the childcare situations if your child's childcare has been closed due to COVID, or school has been closed during the school year. And that we got out ahead on that. And that was a huge deal for our employees who had childcare issues, because it gave them this great sense of security that they were able to take care of their children, even if they were remote teleworking. It's a real hard situation when you've got 4 elementary school age children at home to remote telework 8 hours a day. They're trying to break everything in the background and, empty out your fridge and who knows where everything's going. So, it's brought them great comfort to know, hey, my employer cares enough about me. I can do both things, but here's how they're going to accommodate me. And we've told everybody, call HR, use Teams, pick up, send an email, whatever. And we have a 100% response rate within 12 hours to all of our employees. And that has been another technique that they've really appreciated as well during the pandemic. So again, it's that sense of security for them, that we're reaching out. So I just wanted to touch on all of those kinds of things. Those de-stress our employees. We're also now moving into another phase where we know that mental health is a big issue. So we're going to be reaching out and doing some trainings for our supervisors more on FMLA. How does that work for them, and dealing with some of those types of situations. We have had employees going out on FMLA. We are very proactive on getting our employees to take FMLA when they need it, to be using their, what we call health leave, other places call it sick leave, but to take their health leave when they need it, to encourage them to take care of themselves, their well-being, both mental and physical well-being. When they need to. We are a very, whole being, all, entire self type of organization, and we're moving more and more towards that.
Right, and some of the things that we are implementing now, specifically because the increased stress, is adding some additional health leave time for our employees throughout the year. And also looking at what kind of training we can give our leaders to recognize stress reactions So Karen, I definitely might be talking to you a little bit later. So yeah, looking at training that's appropriate and providing them with additional resources specific to stress and handling stress.
Wonderful. Thank you. It was very helpful. I'm wondering, we have Linda Grant from the health department on the call, and I just wanted to ask if you would like to add anything to what's been said or ask any questions to get that part started off.
Yes, I would like to add a little bit. And first of all, I'm Linda Grant. I work with the mental health court programs in the Human Services Department of the Health Department. But I think the reason I'm on the call is I worked with a regional employee assistance program for 15, 20 years in the area. So I work not only as a therapist to employees and their families, but I also worked with performance issues and workplace issues, performance coaching, working with supervisors and work teams. So I think part of what I can bring to this is talking a little bit about how do you have a conversation, a specific conversation with an employee who's having a work performance issue during this difficult time. And I think when we do that, we build on all of the things the other panel members have said. This isn't a normal time. People are not all going to maintain their resilience, their usual resilience and coping skills and ability to handle difficult people in difficult situations. And I think the kind of thing we'll start to see are related to several categories. One is many people will start to look tired. I think that siege, view of it is a really good description. And across time, even people who are generally quite resilient and have good coping skills, that'll start to get shakier as people become more fatigued and overwhelmed by the sheer duration and the percentage of things in their life that are different right now or new, or the inability to socialize and do so many of their usual coping skills will start to wear them down, and we may start to see differences in their work performance. It could be their error rate might increase, their productivity is not the same. For a lot of people, emotional volume is really cranking up. I've encountered a couple of people in my work at the courthouse who are usually very reasonable, excellent problem solvers, but their emotional reaction to a routine situation is just a little more over the top right now. And for some people, it might be a lot more over the top. So keep an eye out for that and have an awareness. Their attendance might change partly because of the realities of childcare and other things, but also because of that emotional fatigue and concerns about what's going on. And two, I think one of the things we see in extended crisis situations is what I refer to as a priority fatigue. If I have a high-risk member of my family and I'm literally concerned about their life or death, it's harder for me to feel like my boss's priority at work is really quite as important as I would ordinarily, because look at what it's being held in contrast to. So keep in mind, employees may be struggling to prioritize, to maintain their focus, to keep their performance up to the usual level. I think for a lot of people, there is that fatigue and their usual coping skills start to get a little rocky. But you're also going to have some employees, depending on the business you're in, who are dealing with it through denial. This either because of kind of age, they haven't really had real medical crises in their life yet, so it feels kind of academic. It doesn't feel real, and they may not be enthused about wearing masks or taking all the precautions. They may not be struggling to maintain social distancing that's respectful of their coworkers. So I think being aware that for some people, denial is also how they move through tough times. And this is going to seem really strange for a therapist type person to say, but denial isn't all bad. For example, if I were walking down the street and I was thinking of every bad thing that could happen, well, the tree could fall on me, the car could jump the curb and run me down. I couldn't focus. I have to have a certain ability to set things aside, shut them off, and be in denial about the possibilities, or I can get through my day. But the other extreme is people whose denial is so severe and serious, they aren't using good judgment, they aren't being preventive, they aren't following through. So as an employer, you are the one who will sometimes have to have the tough conversation with those folks about, no, you really do need to do these things, and understand that denial is one of the ways people cope with hard things. If I make it go away or pretend it isn't there, then I don't have to feel anxious or afraid. And I think too, some human beings feel a little more comfortable being angry than being scared and anxious. So you will also see partly the fatigue related irritability, but also if I make it go away or I'm mad at it, then I don't have to be scared by it. So all of those things can show up in terms of how people are interacting with their supervisors or their coworkers or general productivity issues. So one thing I would suggest you keep in mind, You are also going to see some of these behaviors from employees who already might have some marginal work issues that were already in corrective action, or you were on the verge of thinking about it. In those situations, work very closely with your HR folks about how to approach it and in what ways you address this, because you're not only dealing with things being exacerbated right now by the situation and wanting to show compassion and support for your employee, but you may also have had a long-term performance issue that needs to be dealt with. So work really closely with you. If you're a supervisor or manager, with your HR, and if you have an EAP, they can be really useful in this kind of situation too. The one other thing I just wanted to quickly throw out is vocabulary. We're talking a lot about things like depression and anxiety because that's our expertise and that's what people go through. But I want you to keep in mind that if you are talking to an individual employee about their work performance issues or how you can support them, or the impact on them, those would not be the words you choose, because it's a medical diagnosis. And as any of you who've worked with FMLA leaves know, there's kind of a line between an employer and the employee's medical issues. So use softer words like, you're looking stressed, or wow, you're not usually, in difficult situations, I don't see you using your usual great skills. So use more work performance related vocabulary. And again, your HR and your EAP can be a huge support to you in how to have those difficult conversations if you've got an employee who's really struggling. I think that's it that I wanted to throw out there. Thank you.
And that was a lot. Wow, that was so much good information. And I just love the way all of your different angles on this question fit together. Really, really nice. I want to open it up for questions to anybody. You can, if you're shy to speak, put something in the chat. Otherwise, just unmute yourself and throw out a question. That's fine.
I would just like to real quick dovetail on Linda, just as an HR person. It is really critical to not try and diagnose your employees and what their problems may be, especially mental health issues. So just kind of hang in there with them, and maybe if you can, if you know how to do it, or work with your HR professional to help guide them to a mental health professional if they need support, but not to be their mental health professional.
So I just want to say, everyone.
Gina, go a little louder, or if you would, please. Thank you.
I just want to say, everyone who's been on the panel today you guys are giving like such gold nuggets and important information. You guys are wise beyond my imagination. I just wanted to kind of make a couple of comments on what Sterling was saying about the graph. I think the graph is very helpful, although I don't know, I agree with Sterling, I don't know how applicable it is to what we're going through, because it isn't a one point in time of crisis. We have been under the siege for a long time, and we actually don't know how long it's going to last. So instead of a point in time and where you have the heroic effort and the disillusionment, we're actually going through the heroic effort while we are suffering through the disillusionment, while we're trying to figure out how to reconstruct. So the curve is sort of kind of like put into like this kind of a big, huge ball of yarn of a mess. And so the model is good to kind of, for us to understand, but I think we also have to understand that we're going through all of the phases at the same time. And the second thing is what Karen said about vulnerability. I think that really speaks truth to how people will feel not better, but less anxious, because when you're dealing with authenticity, you know that your leader is not only with you, but they are real. And I think that connection is so important for everyone to feel like we're in this suit together, and there's no getting out of it. There is no exit. A lot of people are asking for exit strategy, but there's no exit. We just have to go through this together. So I just wanted to make those two comments, and I think you guys are amazing. Thank you.
Thanks, Gina.
I have a question.
Yeah, John.
So first of all, this has really been a fantastic session, not only helping how to deal with employees, but also just friends, family, and people in general that are around us. So it's really been great. Our situation at the Spark Museum is probably a little bit unique in that we only have 2 full-time employees, but we have about 20 or 30 volunteers. And with the employees, you know, they come into work and I see them and I can talk to them. The volunteers, if they're concerned, if they have issues, they just don't show up and we don't hear from them. So I'm wondering if there's any particular kind of message that I should be, you know, sending to the volunteers to make them, you know, to help them cope with this and feel more comfortable with being involved with the museum.
I can speak to that a little bit because CCS actually has 9,000 volunteers, and a lot of them are older. Like our food, like the belling, like the like some of the shelters and things that we have volunteers that are older, and they really did need to not come into work for a while. That was a real thing. We didn't want them to. In fact, we had to kind of talk people out of coming in. We didn't want to put them at risk, and some people were stubborn about it, and it put us in a difficult position because we couldn't necessarily say, you can't come to work. We're not going to let you come to work. We didn't want them to come to work because they're 85 years old and they're going to be doing face-to-face work with handing out supplies to people. So it's a real dilemma. And like you were saying, there's a significant drop off on people who just aren't going to show for a while. And for the first month or so, we probably had 1,000 volunteers who didn't come in. And that's changed a little bit, but you know, that could change again, right?
Dawn, I have a question for you. I'm sorry. Do you have a sense from your volunteers that they're not coming because they're fearful of being in the workplace? Are they stressed in their own lives? I guess that would be.
Yeah, well, it's a good question because we had an all hands volunteer and staff virtual meeting a few weeks ago, and a number of the volunteers just weren't there. So we don't know. I don't really know why they're not, you know, present. And the volunteers who were there, you know, we told them what we were doing in terms of when we do reopen. We're phase 3, so we're not open yet. But when we do reopen, what precautions we're taking and all that to kind of assure them that they'd be safe and that they were our #1 priority. Literally, staff and volunteers, the safety of them being our top priority. But the ones I'm wondering about are, you know, the ones who just kind of we don't really have any contact with, and we do have their email addresses, so we can send proactively send a message to them. But I'd like to make sure that when we do that, it's the right message.
My organization, I'm with Whatcom Council on Aging, is also volunteer heavy and with older adults. And any of our volunteers who chose not to come in did because of their age. And many of them were drivers who go to people's homes. We run the Meals on Wheels program out of
My wife is one of them, by the way.
I'm sorry, who, Miss?
My wife.
Oh, so, but I think that's a really good idea because I am on this meeting about my employees, but it was really, I'm thinking of the volunteers as employees too. And for those who have stepped back, I feel like that having almost like those weekly emails to them is equally as important as those. Now I love this idea of that weekly email to your employees. We also are a little unique too that, you know, that we also have staff among 2 different counties and different cities, and we never see them, like Orcas Island and San Juan Islands. We don't see them very often. They can't come to our staff meetings. They can only be online virtually or anything like that if we have anything like that. And Point Roberts, so we have a lot of distant people as well, and many of them have their own volunteers there that are doing things. So, yeah, I think it's interesting for the volunteers to definitely reach out to those who have stepped back and all said they want to come back. They do not give my job away. I want that route back. They hated to have to leave, but I think it is a good idea to do like a weekly check-in with them, just as if they were employees, to let them know how things are going and you know how things are at least looking right now and what we're doing, and so that they still feel connected to something that some of them had done for 20 years and then had to step away due to their health or due to their age, basically.
Yeah.
And Darcy, this is Linda. I like that idea on so many levels. Not only does it help you maintain that relationship with them, but it also probably is helping them with their sense of isolation. It's one more tie to life as normal and the life we all want to get back to, because and one more tie to something that they're probably feeling lost about. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I jump in and just say, Darcy, if you have other resources, because I also work with the county food banks, and that's really an issue for county food banks who have had a lot of elder volunteers who are now stuck at home feeling like they no longer have value, and
Right.
it's horrible. And so in addition to checking in, if I guess a conversation I'd love to have at some point is how can we help the elders in our community to have things to do that contribute? You know, they contribute so much, and so whatever that looks like, that'd be a great conversation to have.
Definitely would. The isolation factor feels really big here with elders especially. But then I saw Holly's question in the chat box. There's the isolation of working from home. For somebody like me, I work from home all the time, so it may not be such an issue. But for people who are used to the being in an office together, or you know, at least the same building together and being able to see each other, it's a big change. And I'm wondering if you all have any advice for how to help people who are feeling lonely at home, working at home. I know you mentioned some strategies for virtual lunches. Are there other things that you might recommend there?
Oh, wow.
We have
This is Linda. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say my department is doing joke of the day, you know, bad joke of the day. It has to be a really bad joke. And we open our team meetings by going around and seeing everybody's bad joke. It's just because we miss those small times together, the meeting in the hallway and checking in with each other, the having the potlucks, the birthday celebrations. So it's one thing we've done to try and keep that fun connection.
We have created a HIPAA compliant forum. It's like a Facebook thing for our company. And we're posting what music we're listening to in the day. So each employee puts a YouTube video up, and then we comment on it all day long. And then we're also taking walks together via phone. We'll call each other and, like, in between sessions, go take walks in our own neighborhoods. So that's been helpful.
Oh, that's interesting.
We have one team that checks in 3 times a day with each other for 5 to 10 minutes. That's it, just to say hello. And it basically, they call it the cubicle talk, but it's like kind of lunging over to the cubicle next to you. We also have another team that started the water cooler group inside of their teams group, and it's their junk chat or their gossip chat, and all they post there is funny clips, you know, like the cat clip from YouTube or whatever it may be, and it's just their chit chat that they have going, and they can post or not post or post pictures of their whatever. It's completely fine. It's work appropriate, but it's just their way of talking to each other and keeping that social talk open, because something, again, to lower stress is to talk with your work colleagues like you would normally talk to them, and not just about all work all the time. And that's something that people get caught in when they're having Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, is just all work all day, 8 to 5, you know, straight through. And that's not how work life usually works in an office. Usually you're having those conversations in the hallway about what you did on the weekend or what your kids are up to or whatever. So it's important to kind of carry those through the workday now.
Excellent. Any other tips like that or questions people have? All right. Well, I want to tell you that I think we've just got pages of tips and great ideas out of listening to you all today. And we, Holly, Elizabeth, and I will make this into something that will be like a compiled list of tips. And we've done this for the last 2 forums. You can find those tips on the WhatcomTogether website. And I think Holly can, do you want to show us that page and where those are for people and announce the next forum before we close out for today?
Here we are. Okay, so the next forum that we have coming up, and it's happening on Thursday. So we're shifting the day because we want to acknowledge that people are, trying to enjoy a little bit of summertime and often are trying to take off on Fridays. So we're going to start shifting to Thursdays, and we have, I think, we'll plan for 3 more Thursdays, but the one that's coming up next week will be how do we connect with young employees about COVID-19? And this is going to be an important one because, what we know is that younger employees may be less aware of some of the risks. And so this really dovetails to a bigger conversation about how to make it real and how to also respect people's privacy, right? And that they have the right to do whatever they want on their weekends, but we still have to have a way to talk about the health risks so that everybody can be safe. So if you go to the same website, the WhatcomTogether.org, you can sign up for this one. And like Marty said, you can also go back and listen to this one again. I know for myself, I will be listening to this forum again, the recording. That was amazing information. I feel like I could probably listen to it 3 times and still get more out of it. So I just want to take my moment to thank our presenters. That was amazing. That was awesome what you shared today.
I also want to just take a moment to thank all 5 of our presenters and the rest of you for being here. We really value this time in these forums to share information and figure out how we can support one another in supporting employees. So thank you so much. And does anybody have any final comments before we sign off? Okay, great. Well, thank you. And I hope you all have a great day. And I hope to see you next Thursday.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.